Hey, welcome back. It's me, Ibnul J. Farabi. And I have to tell you, I was thinking about something the other day, walking through the dense, noisy grid of Manhattan. I was thinking about empires. Not the ancient kind with marble and legions, but the modern kind, built in shadows. Empires that didn't conquer land, but conquered desire. An empire where the currency was pure, white powder, and the throne was made of blood and billions. This is the story of perhaps the most audacious, violent, and profitable criminal empire in modern history. An empire that didn't just evade a government, it declared war on one. This is the story of the Medellín Cartel. To understand the cartel, you have to understand the man who became its beating heart. Pablo Escobar is a name that's almost mythological now, but he started as a hustler from Medellín, a city of steep hills and deep poverty. He saw a gap in the market, a simple economic principle: supply and demand. The demand in the 1970s and 80s in the United States was for cocaine, a drug of the wealthy and trendy. The supply was the coca leaf grown in the remote Andes of Peru and Bolivia. Escobar, along with a small group of ruthless visionaries like the Ochoa brothers and Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, saw the bridge. They became the logistics experts, the supply chain managers of sin. They organized the processing, the transportation, and most importantly, the distribution. They didn't invent the cocaine trade, but they industrialized it. They turned it from a boutique operation into a multinational corporation with a murderous HR department. And the profits were beyond anything they could have dreamed. We're talking about a net worth for Escobar that, at its peak, was estimated at over $30 billion. He was literally listed on Forbes' richest people list. Think about the absurdity of that. The cartel's business model was brutally efficient. They paid peasant farmers a pittance for coca paste, processed it in hidden jungle labs, and then used a fleet of small planes, boats, and even submarines to move tons of product to the shores of Florida. From Miami, the cocaine flooded American cities. The money flowed back in rivers of cash, so much cash that they had to buy industrial-scale money-counting machines. And still, reports say they would write off up to 10% of their revenue a year to rot, water damage, or rats literally eating the money in their warehouses. With that money came power and a very specific kind of philosophy. In Colombia, they called it plata o plomo, silver or lead, a bribe or a bullet. This wasn't a subtle threat. It was the core of their operational doctrine. They bribed everyone: police officers, judges, politicians, and soldiers. They built entire neighborhoods for the poor in Medellín, earning a twisted Robin Hood reputation. But if the silver didn't work, the lead was immediate and spectacular. They built armies of teenage hitmen, called sicarios, who would ride motorcycles and execute targets with chilling efficiency. The cartel didn't just kill rivals, they killed anyone in their way. They killed police chiefs, they killed journalists, they killed politicians who dared to speak against them. Which brings us to the point where a criminal syndicate decided it was stronger than the state itself. The Colombian government, under pressure from the United States, finally took steps to extradite cartel leaders to face trial in America. For Escobar, this was the ultimate red line. In America, he couldn't buy his way out. So he didn't try to hide. He declared war. He called it the extraditables and issued a public communique. The message was simple. For every cartel member extradited, they would execute 10 Colombian judges. They weren't bluffing. They began a campaign of terror designed to break the will of an entire nation. They bombed the headquarters of Colombia's intelligence service. They blew up an Avianca passenger jet, killing 107 people, to assassinate one presidential candidate. They car-bombed streets, killing hundreds of civilians. The goal was to create so much chaos, so much fear, that the government would have no choice but to negotiate. And in a shocking turn, it worked. The government, reeling and desperate for peace, struck a deal. Escobar would turn himself in, but on his own terms. He built his own private prison, La Catedral, a luxurious compound on a hill overlooking Medellín, complete with a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and, it's alleged, a torture chamber. He continued to run his empire from inside. This was the peak of his arrogance, a king in a self-made castle, thumbing his nose at the world. But it was also the beginning of the end. His reign from prison created enemies, not just with the state, but with his own allies. when he brutally tortured and killed 2 cartel associates inside La Catedral. It caused a scandal so great the government had to move him to a real military base. Fearing that deal was collapsing, Escobar simply walked out. He escaped back into the shadows, now a fugitive from both the state and a new, powerful enemy, a vigilante group called Los Peeps, funded by his former Cali cartel rivals and disgruntled associates. What followed was a frantic, 16-month manhunt. The entire country was looking for him. The U.S. Delta Force and intelligence agencies were advising a special Colombian police task force, and they used Escobar's one vulnerability, his love for his family. By tracking communications to his wife and children, they finally pinpointed him to a middle-class neighborhood in Medellín. On December 2, 1993, surrounded on a rooftop, Pablo Escobar was shot and killed. The official story is that he died in a shootout with police. Many believe he was executed. Regardless, the king was dead. The empire, which had already been fracturing under pressure and internal war, crumbled almost overnight. I think about this story not just as a tale of crime, but as a dark lesson in power dynamics. From my perspective as an engineer and entrepreneur, I see a horrifyingly efficient system built on a feedback loop of violence and capital. But as a storyteller, I see the tragic arc of a man and a city seduced by that power. Medellín was both the beneficiary and the victim of this empire. It's a stark reminder of what happens when institutions, the courts, the police, the political system, are weaker than the corrosive force of unlimited money and unchecked violence. The cartel didn't just traffic drugs, they trafficked in fear, and for a while, they were the most powerful force in the country. The war they started left scars on Colombia that are still healing today. Tens of thousands were killed. It redefined the global drug trade and showed the world the terrifying potential of criminal enterprise. The cocaine cowboys weren't just outlaws. They were architects of an alternate reality where they were the law. And their legacy is a warning, one that echoes far beyond the hills of Medellín. Thank you for listening to this episode of Underworld Kings, The Rise and Fall. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think a bit differently about the nature of power, I'd be so grateful if you'd share the podcast with someone else. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. This show is produced by Light Knot Studios. You can find more of our immersive documentary work, including how we bring these complex histories to life, at lightknotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, take care.